This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by ERI. ERI has a mission to protect people, the planet, and your privacy, and is the largest fully integrated IT and electronics asset disposition provider and cybersecurity-focused hardware destruction company in the United States, and maybe even the world. For more information on how ERI can help your business properly dispose of outdated electronic hardware devices, please visit eridirect.com. Welcome to another edition of the Impact Podcast. This is a very special edition of the Impact Podcast because we've got my longtime friend with us. He's the founder and CEO of the Closed Loop Partners. Welcome back to Impact, Ron Gonen.
Hey, John, great to be speaking with you again, and thank you for having me on.
Hey, you know, Ron, you are a very special person in my life because when I started this podcast 13 years ago, when it was just really a radio show back then, before podcasts became a thing, I didn't have a lot of people that wanted to come on. And I actually called you and you agreed. You were my first guest ever. And so having you back on is always a special event for me. And I'm very grateful to you for all of you've done for me over, 15 years of friendship. Maybe it's 16 years of friendship now. You've both been inspirational, but also aspirational. And so it's just always a great event to have you back on the Impact Podcast.
Well, John, thank you for saying that. And I could describe you the same way.
Well, thanks. And, today we're going to be talking about The Waste-Free World, your brand new book that's coming out. It's already available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and other great bookstores. But before we get into that, I want you to share with our listeners, our viewers, and our readers who haven't met you yet or haven't listened to one of our past podcasts a little bit about the Ron Gonen journey.
Sure. So my journey is one that has always been centered on this intersection between maximizing sustainability and maximizing business success. I've always believed that those two things are synonymous with each other. And I came to that realization very early on in life through a fortunate opportunity where I grew up with a single mom and had to get a job when I was really coming out of middle school, going into high school. And my first job was working for a family, kind of doing everything and anything around their house. I babysat their kids, I fixed the fence, I mowed the lawn. And the dad was one of the first green architects in America, someone named Paul Mocht. And he has an architecture firm called Mocht Architects. And he started speaking to me in the late 80s and early 90s when I was a teenager about sustainable business practices, what we call today circular economy, green building. And it just made total sense to me. I was actually surprised listening to him that everyone didn't build this way.
Right.
And that was my introduction to the world of sustainable business practices. Fast forward, coming out of college, I went to work in management consulting, first at Accenture and then at Deloitte. And that was an important stepping stone in my career because it taught me about software. It taught me about technology development and business process. And then, although it wasn't specifically focused in the sustainability space, it gave me the necessary tools to be successful when I went off and focused on building my own businesses. And that's one thing that I would say to any of your listeners who are in high school or in college and have great aspirations to make a difference in the world. Make sure that you also spend time just putting your head down and getting a good education and developing the tools and the skills that you need to match with your passion and aspiration to make a difference. But after about 6 or 7 years at Andersen Consulting and Deloitte, I realized that I now had the skill set to go off and pursue my passion, which was this intersection between maximizing sustainable business practices and profits. And went back to business school at Columbia Business School and developed my first company, which is a recycling company called Recycle Bank, that I ran as the CEO until 2010. And then after I exited Recycle Bank, I started a small solar company. And then from there, got a very unique opportunity, which was to join the Bloomberg administration in New York City as what was termed at the time the Deputy Commissioner for Sanitation, Recycling, and Sustainability. But the core job description was to really reimagine and rebuild New York City Sanitation Department with a focus on sustainable business practices and eliminating landfill disposal costs. And after that experience, I went on to start Closed Loop Partners, which is what I'm doing today and have been doing since 2014.
I also don't want you to leave out, though, you've also become an educator along the way. Somewhere around 2010, you also started teaching at your alma mater, correct?
Yeah, it was an interesting experience and opportunity for me. So when I got to Columbia Business School in 2002, and people would ask me, what are you going to do when you graduate from Columbia Business School? Are you going to investment banking? Are you going into strategy consulting? I would say, well, actually, I'm going to build a business that focuses on this intersection between maximizing profitability and sustainable business practices. That's what I view as the future of success in business. And people would literally say to me, that's commendable, but how do you plan to pay back your school loans with that as your career? That's how that attitude
Wow.
was 20 years ago at some of
Wow.
the elite business schools. As it turns out, Columbia Business School invested in my first business in my first year at Columbia.
Wow.
They gave me my first $100,000, my first investor. I ended up returning about $1.5 million to them from that investment.
Wow.
So they were instrumental in helping me get my entrepreneurial career launched, and hopefully I was helpful to them in providing them a great return. But then fast forward to 2010, after I had my first exit, they invited me to come back to Columbia Business School and build a course focused on entrepreneurship and social impact.
That's awesome. And you still continue to teach there?
I took a leave from teaching 2 years ago.
Okay.
I had started having
Your
children. I now have 2 young boys at home.
That's
And so my family first, and then my firm gets 110% of my time currently. But the 10 years I taught at Columbia were phenomenal, and I plan to eventually go back.
what I love, Ron, is we've been friends so long now, and we've been able to stay friends and work together and help each other along the way wherever we could. But one of my favorite memories of coming to visit you is when you started Closed Loop Partners. I went up probably 2 or 3 months into your original office, and you want to talk about humble beginnings. I mean, you just had the most humble of beginnings at Closed Loop Partners, but had the biggest of dreams. For our listeners and viewers out there, you have become, if not the most prolific, but one of the most prolific investors in the ESG circular economy space. And for our listeners who want to find your great website and your colleagues at Closed Loop Partners, you go to closedlooppartners.com, closedlooppartners.com. Explain what the mission and the vision was at Closed Loop Partners and how you've evolved that great brand over the years.
Sure. The focus of Closed Loop Partners is to build the circular economy. And we find the circular economy as manufacturing without a reliance on natural resource extraction to manufacture products, and without a reliance on landfills to dispose of products. And if you can manufacture using sustainable material science, advanced product design, innovative manufacturing systems, you can eliminate a lot of the cost of extracting natural resources and waste in your system, preserve our natural resources and environment, and maximize margins. So that's the core focus of Closed Loop Partners. And our investment thesis is to find companies that are building out these types of systems. The way we're structured.
Yeah, you have I'm interrupting. You have an amazing track record there, though. Just share with our listeners some of the great brands that have invested in your fund there.
Sure. So our investors include the world's largest retailers and consumer goods companies. On the retail side, our investors include Walmart, Amazon, and Starbucks.
Wow.
On the consumer product side, we have Unilever, P&G, Nestle, Colgate Palmolive, J&J, 3M. We have the 5 largest beverage companies, including Coke and PepsiCo. One of the world's largest technology companies, including Microsoft, are all investors in our firm.
I mean, that's as great as a lineup as you can have, because they believe in you and your vision, which just goes to, again, your tremendous career and what you've done and set out to do. But I interrupted. You were going to go on. So talk a little bit about how it's gone since you started.
Yeah. So we started with that investment thesis, and then built the firm out to be structured as an investment firm that has 4 asset classes. Okay. We have a venture fund, a growth equity fund, a credit fund, and a PE fund. And we also own an innovation center called the Center for the Circular Economy. And that structure enables us to look at the bottlenecks in the system, identify solutions, and then apply the right form of capital to help that solution scale.
Got it. And how? We're going to come back to that later on. But again, for our listeners and viewers who want to find Ron and his colleagues at Closed Loop Partners, go to www.closedlooppartners.com. Now for the announcement of the day, your amazing new book, The Waste-Free World: How the Circular Economy Will Take Less, Make More, and Save the Planet. I mean, Ron, you've got, I've known you a long time, and your Midas touch is well known to me and to everybody else around you in your ecosystem. But I'll tell you what, and I shared this with you off the air, if there's ever a time to come out with a book titled as such and on the subject matter that you're covering, man, you picked the perfect time. This is the time that it seems like when we started on this journey in circular economy and sustainability, we were a little bit early, frankly speaking. But I'll tell you, your book is right on time, because it seems like all the stars have aligned.
Right. Well, I think preparations and patience is an enormous part of success in any field. And so I think that the time that you and I have spent over the past 10 or 15 years in this space was preparation and patience. Sometimes I get feedback or comments now that the circular economy and sustainability is becoming, and ESG is becoming more central to the way we do business. I'll get feedback or comments like, that idea you just had, or that thing you just said, is so timely, so on point. How did you come up with that so quickly? And I'll say, I actually came up with that 15 years ago, because nobody was listening at that time. And I just stayed patient, and I refined it, and I stayed patient and I refined it. And now we're here, and it's resonating. And that's been a big part of this journey, is just, back to your comment about visiting our first office and how
I'll never forget that, ever. I'll never forget it.
And we just we tried to be as lean as possible, and as focused as possible, and as patient as possible, and determined as possible. And things are now starting to be responsive to our investment thesis and how we view the world moving forward.
When did you have the epiphany or the real hankering to say, I want to write this book, and I need to get this out?
Oh, it's a funny story. The credit goes to a whole bunch of other people that don't include me. So Alec Baldwin, the actor, has a podcast.
Right.
I'll give him a little plug, because he's has a lot of responsibility for this book. It's a podcast called Here's the Thing.
I love that. I love the podcast. I'm a big fan.
So I'm a big fan of the podcast too. So I get a call one day, and it's from the producer of the podcast, and it says, I'm the producer of Alec Baldwin's podcast, Here's the Thing. I said, oh, great. I'm a big fan. And he said, well, Alec wants to do a show on waste and recycling, and you've been recommended as the person that he should have on the show.
Wow.
And part of me is thinking, is one of my friends playing a prank on me? Part of me thinking like, hey, this is a great way to get the message out. So I went on to Alec Baldwin's podcast, and we had a great conversation for an hour about the world of waste and recycling. And a couple of days later, I get a email from a woman who says, I'm a accomplished book agent. Here's my track record and my bio. My husband and I just listened to you on this podcast. You have a book here. would you be interested in writing a book? And I said, well, if I could get a book contract from an established publisher that I knew could market it, and you could help me find a great researcher who could help me write the book, I'd be interested. And so I'll give her a plug. Her name's Emma Parry. She went out and promoted the idea behind the book, and Penguin Random House offered me a contract, and Emma found me a great researcher. And then I went off and wrote the book. But in order for me to get to that point of writing the book, there had to be this confluence of events and other people. And so that's the story behind how the book came about.
Well, and what year was this approximately?
2017, I think I was on the podcast. And so it took a while to write the book. Part of it is, it takes a while to write a book.
Right.
Part of it is I'm the CEO of a growing firm. Part of it is I'm a dad to two young boys. So you
and a husband who
has a very supportive wife who said, you can go ahead and write this book. And so, there's a confluence of people and events that had to come together to enable me to write this book. And the timing is really good for when it's coming out. So.
And like everything else you do, you take it very seriously. I'm just going to show our listeners and our viewers out there. This is the book. You were kind enough to send me an advanced copy. So I printed it off and read it, of course, but this is a big book. So you just didn't you didn't take that responsibility lightly, like you never do. And it's really a great book, Ron. And it's going to be massively successful because you cover so many important topics, that affect all of us. There's nobody that's listening or watching or reading this podcast today that is not affected by the topics that you go through in the book. And I want to start with, the whole issue of linear versus circular economy. And why is it paramount that we make the move post haste to a circular economy, behavioral, DNA and culture, and get away from this linear waste economy that we all grew up with and we know to be true here in America to date?
There's a number of advantages to transitioning from a linear to a circular economy. I'll touch on one key reason.
Okay.
And that key reason is because the system as it exists today is gamed for the advantage of the extractive industries, so oil, mining, timber, and the landfill industries. The system is not set up to maximize transparency and to be for the benefit of consumers and taxpayers and society. We've been cheated for the last 75 years by being marketed to that you need more stuff. And once you finish with that stuff, you throw it out and you go buy more stuff. And the problem with that system is every time you're buying something, you're paying a fee for the natural resource extraction, for the material that is being used to make that product. And then your tax dollars are being used to pay for the disposal of that in landfill. And that cost has been hidden and tucked away so that consumers and taxpayers wouldn't recognize that the extractive industries and the landfill industries were getting rich on the back of the consumer and the taxpayer. And that's one of the main reasons why we should transition away. Now, you'll notice I haven't said anything about climate change or environment or sustainability in that explanation.
Right.
There are many reasons that I can point to from a sustainability and climate change perspective as to why we should transition. But if that is not of interest to you, you should want to transition from a linear economy solely because you're going to significantly reduce cost in your life.
Got it. You touch on many important topics in the book. Green grocers, the sustainable closet, go into some of these, and then I love the one, I've got one word for you, Benjamin. And of course, we know, being of my age at least, we all know The Graduate and Mrs. Robinson. I mean, the issue of plastics is massive. Share some of your thoughts on these critical topics of apparel recycling, plastic, and getting it out of our oceans, and all the wrong places that it is, and how you attacked it in your great book.
So let's follow that train of thought that I had earlier in the conversation about this linear system.
Yep.
Is gamed to be for the benefit of extractive industries and landfill industries.
Right.
During the past decade, there's been this emergence in the fashion apparel industry of what's called fast fashion.
Okay.
Which is, I make a bunch of cheap t-shirts, bunch of cheap pants. People can buy a t-shirt or a pair of pants for $4, $5, $6. They use it a few times. It's of low quality, so then they get rid of it and then they buy the next product.
Right.
The result is that the amount of apparel in our waste stream has gone from 1 to 2% to now 8, 9, 10%.
Wow.
One reaction could be, woe is us, it's terrible that there's more waste. Another reaction could be, well, who's paying for all of that apparel to go to landfill? We, the taxpayers, are. And what that means is that we've created a system that permits companies to push the cost of managing their product off to the public. So whether or not you or I or any of your listeners wear those fast fashion products, our tax dollars are used to subsidize the disposal of them in landfill.
Wow.
That cost should be the responsibility of the producer. I'm a big believer of, you want to be in the fast fashion business? It's America. It's capitalism. It's free market. Go for it. I'm just not willing to pay for the disposal of your product in landfill. You be responsible for that. The challenge for those companies is, if they have to be responsible for the disposal of their product in landfill, their business model doesn't work anymore.
Right.
And that's what I mean by the system is being gamed, where a lot of companies and industries have been able to externalize costs that they should be responsible for onto the public. We're a society that promotes ourselves as capitalists, while behind the scenes, you've got a couple of industries that are collecting our tax dollars and then bragging about how they're successful because they're the titans of capitalism. Not so. And that trickery and that game has to end.
Talk a little bit about now your day job, running Closed Loop Partners, and the intersection of the circular economy, the opportunities that are coming across your desk now, as opposed to when you started Closed Loop, and the acceleration of those opportunities. And how does that look right now? And what do you foresee in the months and years ahead here?
Yeah. So when we got started, we oftentimes found innovative technologies and solutions that nobody else was investing in, and there'd usually be one in the space.
Right.
Now what we're seeing is a proliferation of entrepreneurs and solutions in the space. We could talk about it in the electronic waste space, which well, which is 5, 10, 15 years ago in the United States, there were only a handful of people working on electronic waste.
Right.
Now, at every step in the chain, there's people working on collection, sortation, mail back. Some people are doing battery recycling. Some people are just doing smartphones. Some people are doing every kind of e-waste. Some people are saying, I just do commercial. Some people are saying, I wipe your data and then I recycle it. And so we're seeing this proliferation of entrepreneurs get into the space, because fortunately people are recognizing that, hey, there's money to be made here.
Right. You were so kind enough years ago to introduce me to one of what was then one of your portfolio companies, still is, and a massive success, Amp Robotics, Matanya Horowitz. And thanks to you, we became the first company in our space to leverage his great technology, and Montagna became a great friend of ours. Talk a little bit about some of your portfolio companies, and I know it's like your children now. I mean, because you've grown this amazing portfolio. Who are some of your favorites, and you see as creating breakthrough technologies that can scale and really impact the whole world?
Well, we love all of our portfolio companies equally, like our children.
Like our children.
Because I'm talking about one portfolio company or CEO doesn't mean that I love anybody less.
Okay.
But a couple that I'll touch on that we're super excited about is we have a portfolio company called Home Biogas, which is a company headquartered in Israel that has developed the first household size anaerobic digester. So anaerobic digesters convert organic matter. So that could be your food waste, could be your biological waste, into gas. They have small enzymes in anaerobic digesters that eat the organic matter and then release gas, and you're capturing that gas.
Right.
Large-scale anaerobic digesters have been around for years. Most large municipalities have anaerobic digesters at their wastewater treatment facilities. More municipalities are building large-scale digesters for food waste. No one's been able to figure out how to bring it down to the household level. And that's important for a number of reasons. One that I'll just mention is that in emerging markets, you oftentimes don't have the road infrastructure to actually drive what we think of as a waste or sanitation vehicle down. The time and the capital required to build large-scale digesters or advanced landfills takes years and billions of dollars. And so, similar to what happened in the cell phone or the telecom world, where the cell phone leapfrogged static telecom infrastructure, we think that home biogas can leapfrog traditional sanitation infrastructure by literally going directly into the home and saying, you can put all of your food waste, even your biological waste, into this appliance. It'll convert it to gas that you can then cook off of. So that's an example of a technology and a company that we think is massively catalytic and solves a number of issues around the world, from sanitation to pollution issues, to clean energy, to socioeconomic issues in a lot of regions. So that's one that we're excited about. Another company I'll mention is a company called Mori, M-O-R. It's a company that came out of MIT and Tufts. And Mori has created a odorless and tasteless silk protein that gets sprayed on fruits, vegetable, and meat that creates an oxidization barrier to eliminate spoilage. With that type of technology, you can now eliminate all of the plastic packaging and wrapping that goes into food preservation. And that's one that we did with MIT invested, Bill Gates invested, and we invested. So
when does that get commercialized? When do we see that being used in Whole Foods and the great supermarkets we all shop in?
You'll see Mori commercialized in the next 12 to 24 months.
Wow.
They're already past the pilot stage, and home biogas is already being sold in over 50 countries. They have thousands of systems out there on the market.
When you buy it for your house, what's the ROI on something like that on home biogas?
Oh, it's very quick. So a home biogas system only costs about $500.
What? I mean, so every home in America and around the world should be one day buying this system.
Yeah, we're very. If you think about the cost, I mean, if you think about for the United States, when a municipality rolls out a curbside organics program and wants to take your food waste to a compost facility or anaerobic digester, or even if they're still picking up your food waste in the garbage, what's required is a very expensive truck with a lot of fuel, a lot of maintenance on the hydraulics, a driver. It's got to drive around, pick up this stuff, drive it to either a landfill or a compost facility or anaerobic digester. If a municipality can strip out all of that cost and just say, hey, John, here's this appliance for your home, It's going to take care of your food waste for you. And by the way, create gas for cooking. That takes care of about 40 to 50% of the waste that an average American home generates.
For our listeners, viewers, and readers who've just joined us, we've got Ron Gonen. He's the founder and CEO of Closed Loop Partners. More importantly for today, he's also the author of The Waste-Free World. You can buy it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or other great bookstores. Please do buy it and read it. Ron, you just mentioned Morey and the plastic issue. Are we going to be able to tackle this critical issue that the media covers, all the time, and clean up our oceans, our rivers, our lakes, our environment from this horrific problem that's now made its way back into our water systems across America and across the world, our drinking water systems? What's the future of cleaning up this plastic problem?
We're going to be able to solve it, but the problem is so expansive and severe. In the best case scenario, it'll probably take us a decade to solve it. Okay. One thing that's important for your readers to understand about how severe and pollutive the issue is that most people don't realize that plastic, virgin plastic, namely, comes from petroleum.
Right.
So when you get plastic in the water system that you're digesting, or in fish that you're eating, that is exactly the same as digesting gasoline. It's exactly the same. So that just gives your listeners a sense of how dangerous to our health this is. And that gets, again, back to my comment about externalizing costs. Is you have lots of people around the world who get sick because of the amount of plastic that we digest. And it's our healthcare system that has to deal with that.
The aftermath.
That's not how capitalism should work. An even more acute example of that, and this is one of the reasons why the plastic issue, I think, will get solved, is you're now seeing the plastics industry run up against another powerful industry. So it's no longer the plastics industry against environmentalists. Now you've got the plastics industry running up against, let's say, the hotel and tourism industry, where somebody builds a $1 billion resort in Southeast Asia, and people pay top dollar to come stay at that resort, and all of a sudden you got plastic rolling up on the beach. You got your customers coming to you and saying, this isn't what I paid for, I'm not coming back, and I'm going to give you a review that you got plastic rolling up on the beach. The owner of this $1 billion resort is thinking to themselves, but you don't understand, customer, I'm not at fault for that. I didn't put the plastic there. I don't want the plastic there.
Right.
See the tourism industry start to say, this needs to get resolved because it's eating into my profit. Same thing with the fish industry. If you get people who say, you know what, I'm not going to eat fish anymore because of all the plastic that's in it, or maybe my family's just going to eat, one piece of fish less a week because of all the plastic issue, that has huge ramifications for the fish industry. So you're going to see the fish industry also say, we got to keep our oceans clean because that's a direct correlation to my sales. And so you're seeing a confluence of self-interested parties say, we got to get this done. And that's oftentimes how
change happens.
How change happens. So it will get solved, but it is a severe and massive problem that, in the best case scenario, it's going to take us about a decade.
When people read your book, your new book, The Waste-Free World, what if you boil it down, Ron, what do you want them to, what's their takeaway? If I'm on an elevator and someone says, how's that new book you just read, The Waste-Free World? What do you want my takeaway to be so I'm able to share that message with others?
There's an economic system called the circular economy that will drive a lot more prosperity if we can eliminate the linear system we've been operating under and transition to a circular economy. it's about prosperity and how we achieve that prosperity, and we do that by developing circular business models.
It seems though, given the political times we live in with the Biden presidency and the interest level both from Asia and Europe, that the stars are aligned for this to happen. Are the next 4 years make it or break it in terms of us breaking through and making a permanent breakthrough in that model?
I don't know that I would use the term make it or break it, because I think that there's a number of influential players.
Okay.
What I would say is we have a generational opportunity right now, because you've got the Biden administration that's very focused on this. You've got the EU that's very focused on this.
Right.
You've got a number of investors that are very focused on this.
Right.
Consumers are focused on it. You've got local regulators focused on it. So you've got this confluence of interested parties already right now to work on it. It's a generational opportunity that if we don't take it, it's not to say it's make or break. It's to say that it would be a lot more challenging, and the cost we will end up incurring would be massive.
Ron, you've done so much over the years, and now with Closed Loop Partners, what's your vision in the years ahead with Closed Loop? How big can Closed Loop be? How big can that portfolio grow? How big can your funds grow? You already have the who's who of what's what in terms of institutional and corporate investors. What's the future of Closed Loop? Double and tripling in the years ahead? 5 times, 10 times? What's going on?
Yeah, that's a good question. We view the circular economy, we view the transition to a circular economy as the biggest transition of capital from one system to another since the Industrial Revolution. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars that will transition from production using virgin and raw material to production systems that are using recycled material or product design software that eliminates waste. So from an opportunity standpoint as a firm, we would be like to be the leader or one of the leaders in that multi-hundred billion dollar transition. That's the aspiration. On a day-to-day basis, we just focus on delivering results for our investors the way we told them we would for that particular fund, with a belief that if we do a good job for this set of investors on this fund, it'll lead to them becoming larger investors in our next fund and more investors joining us. And slowly but surely we'll continue to build value, but we can never take our eye off of what do we need to get done today.
And with that, I'm going to leave it for today. And for our listeners and viewers out there, to find Ron and his colleagues, please go to www.closedlooppartners.com to buy his new book, The Waste-Free World, which I've read and I love and I think is really important for everybody to read right now, given the times that we live in. Please go to Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, or other fine bookstores. Ron Gonen, you are not only a great friend, but you are an inspiration throughout my career. And I just want to say thank you for all you do to make the world a better place. The world will be a lot worse off without you. I wish we had 50 of you, but thank God for you.
Thank you, John. And great to be on your show again. And look forward to continuing to build value together in the future.
This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by Trajectory Energy Partners. Trajectory Energy Partners brings together landowners, electricity users, and communities to develop solar energy projects with strong local support. For more information on how Trajectory is leading the solar revolution, please visit trajectoryenergy.com.